Welcome everybody to Grad Expectations. So we're going to have an hour of fun and discussion around how you get into the startup job of your dreams and creating businesses and working for corporates. And there's a whole lot of things to share. The people on the call, the panelists, have had extensive experience in lots of varied, interesting areas. So we're going to be looking at internships, fellowships, and then the true grit of how you get into the job of your dreams. Firstly, I would like to actually do an acknowledgement of country. I'm physically on the land of the Dja Dja Wurrung people, so I'd like to respect their elders past and present. And for those of you in Melbourne, where we would be hosting this at Stone and Chalk at 710 Collins Street, I'd like to recognise the peoples of the Kulin Nation and respect their elders past and present. So yes, we would be at the very groovy hip Stone and Chalk hub where our facilitator Jed and I both work, but we're not there. We're online, so thank you for coming and joining us in this virtual event. So Stone and Chalk, who are we? What do we do? Stone and Chalk Group is Australia's leading impact network for emerging tech. Together with AusCyber, we have curated a community of over 400 startups and scale-ups in sectors including fintech, cybersecurity, AI, prop tech, reg tech, ag tech, space tech, and beyond. We are a not-for-profit and we're identifying to nurture, connect, and propel people and those looking to solve the world's most pressing social and business challenges. So you're here as part of the Pivott project. This is a fantastic program that's been powered by LaunchVic. And it's basically to provide advice, support, mentoring, job to people who want to pivot to an opportunity within a startup or scale-up environment. So some of you may already be familiar with our Start Smart Academy, where you can actually do 12 modules online and hear from amazing founders from around the country, hear their journey. It's very much a grassroots program, so they're quite short modules, but it gives you some really fascinating and talking about true gritty insight into what it is to work for a startup, going in with your eyes wide open, understanding the fact that there's often a flat structure, there's often ambiguity, and developing your skills to be able to have fierce and frank conversations with your often founder, CEO, COO, and you know, the multiple hats scenario. We've also got a fantastic mentoring opportunity. It's called Connect, and we're about to launch our jobs platform, which is super exciting. The point of difference with our jobs platform is it has a great matching tool. So I would recommend for those of you who are interested in future opportunities to definitely update your profile and share it with us. And then once the jobs start filtering through in the next couple of weeks, you'll be the first people available to do that matching. But without any further ado, I actually hand over to this fabulous group of people. I just wanted to introduce them all. Jed Gladwin is our facilitator this evening, and he is also the founder of Straight Up. So he works in recruitment, really understands where there are opportunities, and has a lot of insight and respect for the journey people take to get to a job in a startup. Daisy Johnson is a StartMate Fellowship graduate, and she works for Baraja, and she'll share a little bit of information about that experience, but she actually comes from an advertising background, so she's definitely done a significant pivot, and her experience through StartMate has helped her with that. Inder Singh has had an extensive corporate background. He worked for IBM for years. He actually did a very brave and significant pivot by doing the intense programming course at General Assembly, and he is the founder of Consult Experts. So he's had a variety of different experiences in corporate, but he's now pivoted into startup land. Ashley Lee is a university graduate. She's done an undergrad and a postgrad qualification, and she's also an advocate of internships, and she now has a fantastic opportunity where she's the associate brand manager at CTRL Group. And we have the lovely Annette Doherty, a colleague of mine, and Annette also has an extensive background, corporate, government, not-for-profit, but at the moment she is actually the general manager of Ribbit, And Ribbit is a fantastic platform for people who want to be matched to a corporate startup and get an opportunity to learn on the job. So it's all about internships, but she'll talk further about that when I hand over to the panel and to Jed now.
Thanks so much, Abby. So this evening we'll hear from four unique stories about meeting professional expectations and creating positive career pivots. So let's dig into some of the stories we have here. A question for the whole panel to begin with, actually. So what did you do before your pivot to work in startup land, so to speak? And I'll actually direct that to Daisy to begin with.
Thanks, Jed. Yes, so as Abby actually mentioned in her intro, I was originally in advertising, working as an account manager for a couple of creative advertising agencies. Prior to that, I completed an undergraduate degree at Melbourne Uni as a Bachelor of Arts in majoring in politics and international studies. So I moved into advertising and then from there realized it wasn't really my shtick after a while and did my research and my own networking and then made the transition into a startup called Stocard, which is a digital wallet for your phone. And then after that, I completed the Startmate Fellowship and now I'm at Baraha.
Oh, well, so actually your second startup that you're working at now.
Yeah, the first one was probably more of an entry level role. And it was really just to get my foot in the door. I was willing to sacrifice on salary and even job title just to get my foot in the door. But yes, that was kind of on my own accord. And then the current job I'm in now was through the Startmate Fellowship.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Daisy. And how about yourself, Ashley?
Yes. So Abby touched on, I am a university grad. So my journey before landing at my role at the first startup, before then during my bachelor's, I did a lot of volunteering. So I spent about 2 years volunteering at an international organization. And then after that, I took on a year-long internship. And then during my master's degree, that's when I transitioned to an AI startup where I got to funnel the skills from my degree and the experiences I gained from the volunteering and the internship into the role. And then here I am at a second, I'll say control group, which is where I'm working now, is a scale up, but it's been a very exciting journey for me.
Yeah, excellent. So security scale up, isn't it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent. Annette, Inda?
Oh, hi. Yes. So I've been in the workforce for 40 years, showing my age. So I've kind of worked in just about every sort of scenario you can imagine. I actually started in Australia. I started in retail, David Jones. But yeah, look, I've worked in really large global software companies. I've worked in just about every size of business you can imagine here in Australia, both owner operated as well as, you know, with boards, etc. And I've also worked for a number of startups and I've helped a number of startups. My pivoting has been fairly frequent, so much so I'm almost dizzy. And I would probably describe it more of a flip-flop. So, jumping from one to the other and, you know, observing the differences and trying to get a handle on what I like and at the end of the day, where I can be most productive so that, you have that good sense of purpose and you feel like you're achieving something as well as learning something and building up a fabulous network. So yeah, lots of different types of organizations in my background.
Sure, I'll probably just rewind a little bit as well. My accent is Canadian. I've been in startup land for the last kind of 4 years. And as Abby mentioned, I come from working in the corporate technology sector with IBM. Just before IBM, I did do my math kind of computer science degree in Canada. But with IBM, it was roughly about almost 20 years. And it was fantastic because, I actually had 12 different jobs in the company and it took me all around the world. So I spent probably about almost 7 years working on the US side. So working with companies like the Toys R Us, the Home Depot, which is like the Bunnings, Shoppers Drug Mart, which is like the Priceline. So working with a lot of good kind of large enterprises. I'll probably date myself, but Amazon was coming onto the scene at that time. eBay was there as well. So working in the retail space at large enterprise was a lot of change happening with the whole .com boom at that time. And then on the US side, I work with about 125,000 clients across the US through a sales team. and also with a number of our business partners across the US with a field team and also an inside team as well. That kind of brought me over to Australia, where I kind of was there to kind of build up one of our sales team for the Asia Pacific region. And so working with, with teams in China, Korea, Vietnam, and also in Eastern Europe and Latin America. Then I went back to Canada to kind of fix a few things, but then I kind of came back on my own, and then kind of worked for an IT advisory company called Gartner for about 3.5 years. And that was really good because it kind of gave me a good 30,000 foot level of what was happening in Australia. I was finally on the ground, not going into hotels and airports, but actually taking a train into the office and actually working in the local Australian climate.
Yeah, awesome. And that kind of so that, I guess, market exposure in different countries and whatnot and different industries maybe gave you that kind of idea to go and start kind of consult experts, was it?
Yeah, look, it did. What really happened was I always would have regret not going into startup land. So I always had these crazy ideas in my head all the time, and I was always trying to find ways to try to filter them. And I actually reached out to a few people and some founders at the time. And one of them was a founder who actually started a startup in Adelaide. I asked him, like, how did you make your transition into startup land, and how did you get started with all these ideas? And he said he actually learned to code. And that kind of got me onto my journey into kind of going into General Assembly and taking a course for 4 months to learn to code. But I got so much more out of it, which in our discussion.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, we'll dig into that a bit more into that coding course that you did there, because it's particularly interesting. And a question for Ashley, as our university graduate: do you feel that your university course prepared you adequately for your first role at?
So I think for the large part, yes, it did. It did prepare me to get into the startup land, but rather than from a coursework perspective where the skills are taught, I guess my degree or my degrees prepared me more so on the side where, in the thinking side, that I could actually challenge and think outside of the box. And I guess what's really taught me to adapt to the job landscape was my experiences through the internship and the volunteering. But with that said, I do believe that it varies depending on the discipline and the course that you do. For instance, the sciences or the engineering disciplines, they carry a very technical component. I think the job landscape will be slightly different. But at the same time, something that I really enjoyed through uni was I got to do a breadth subject, and that was in interaction design. So that's how I actually got my first internship, because I was able to carry over those skills into a digitization internship. And then that sort of sparked interest. And then I was kind of crazy, and I was like, I really wanted to understand more about how tech could be used in different settings. And that's how I landed at the AI place, and then now cybersecurity.
Yeah, excellent. So was it quite a bit of networking by the sounds of it to kind of get there?
Not exactly, but I was trying to learn as much as possible because I just wanted to break away from the business side of things.
Yeah, excellent. And how did your kind of startup employer induct you to kind of transition into your new role when you joined?
Into my current role, did you say?
When you actually first joined, I think there was a couple startups that you worked with, right? What kind of support did you get when it came to actually transitioning into the business?
The founder that I worked with was very nice, and then he gave me a lot of his advice and knowledge through his experience in the startup land, and then I adapted into the startup land by doing things on the job and then just learning from his guidance.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ashley. So some rapid fire questions here for you guys. I think that's what Abby's called them. Did any of you complete? I think we did. We've actually got a few people on the panel here that have. Any of you complete some internships or volunteering before you actually kind of broke into the startup world? So yeah, anyone want to share a bit about that?
I'm happy to start. When I was at uni, I did a couple of internships at some advertising agencies. And that's how I ended up working in advertising, or got my first job in advertising, because I'd had that experience interning at a couple of agencies while I was studying.
Yeah, awesome. And sorry, go on, Annette. I think I just cut you off.
I was just going to say, yeah. So my sort of experience in startup land was more of at a mature age. Having worked on the periphery for a long time and having a particular interest in augmented and virtual reality, I volunteered to work for a startup as a learning experience, and then they started paying me a bit, but it was actually, for me, it was more about the learning experience. And at the same time, I also did a day a week with another startup founder in telehealth. And so the telehealth was me and the founder in his dining room dining room table. And with the ARV company, I worked remotely, but we were maybe a team of 5, just start. And it was at the very beginning of both of those. Fantastic experience. I'd recommend anybody to do it. I really would.
Yeah, wow. So working with the founder in their kitchen, did you say? That's
at this dining room table in this little 1-bedroom apartment in Darlinghurst, with the cat.
Yeah, proper startup life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
and he drew on the windows. He had these massive windows overlooking William Street, and all of the thinking and everything was drawing on the windows.
Yeah, wow, love it.
It's great.
And did you undergo any kind of internships?
Yeah,
or
look,
anything like that?
I'll share one. Maybe it's a little bit unconventional, but I was hanging around. I was just hanging out in different like co-working spaces and Slack channels and kind of meeting people and stuff. And then there was an application that I came across online. It was for an accelerator in Sydney. And so I had this kind of crazy idea and just kind of jotted it all down and decided, before the application was due at midnight. So I just kind of filled in this application and then went through the whole interview process for it. It was an idea that I had. And I got into the first part of this accelerator in Sydney as part of that. And that was kind of where my eyes really opened up to the other founders that were there and what was possible, and just the terminology of there's some science and art behind taking a startup to the next level. And that was where the light bulb started going off in my head in terms of what's now possible through a very specific process just by applying to this accelerator.
Yeah, wow, incredible. And Ashley, there was 2 internships for yourself, right? I think you mentioned earlier.
I did a year-long internship with uni, so that was a student at work program, and then I volunteered for the rest. But then at the AI startup, it was a part-time position, so did volunteer for a bit, and then internship, and then volunteered a bit, and then startup. If that makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, look, I think volunteering internships, I think a fantastic way to get experience, obviously, these days. I think, don't get me wrong, current laws and everything like that, there's limitations around unpaid internships. But yeah, I think there's a lot more platforms out there, I think, to help with that, which is great. And a question for Annette, talk about Ribbit a bit more. The internship model is one that you're really passionate about. Can you share with everyone the Ribbit model and how you equip students and employers to achieve the best results from an internship?
Love to. So the marketplace is ribbit.net. That's the URL. It's completely free to join. I encourage all students who are looking for paid work relevant to what they're studying or work related that for course credit, get on there, get your profiles up and get matched to job. It's a skills-based matching, no experience needed. And look, it was built by CSIRO and launched in late 2015. It was acquired by Stone & Chalk last July. There's been over 16,000 job applications through there. We've got 54 open roles at the moment. And basically, you set up your profile, and as soon as a job is posted that matches your criteria, you get matched to the employer. They can invite you to apply, and or you can just go and apply. You can find jobs and apply. So yeah, we are very conscious of the fair work requirements, and so it's paid internships or it's course credit. If it's course credit, it has to be approved by your supervisor at your university to meet the criteria. The other thing that we do to connect students to jobs is we run these talent jams. So they're like speed dating, except it's a job interview. And we ran one recently, which we had to move very quickly online. It was going to be at Adelaide Uni, where we basically set up 120 job interviews that happened in the course of 1 hour. And 80% of those companies found students that they wanted to continue talking to with a view to hiring them at some point. So these events are incredibly successful. But what they also bring for the students is, especially when they're in person, of course, which I much prefer, is it's not just about, the chance of landing a job. It's you get to practice your interviewing technique. You get to build your network. You actually also get to see how you compare with other students that are trying to get the same job, and we have mentors around that help you get ready, and there's just lots of really great stuff that happens as a consequence. The talent jams have been so successful. There's actually a research paper coming out later this year that's been authored by a researcher at Data 61 that's looking actually at the impact of talent jams. So they're just waiting for peer review and publishing approval. So that'll be really interesting to share when that comes out. But yeah, so yeah, our focus is helping students become more employable and putting talent where it's needed most, which is to help startups scale. And there are kind of two big goals.
Yeah. Look, I think having that internship or even volunteering work really does increase employability for someone trying to break into the industry. Really
as much as 40%. The research shows that paid work relevant to your studies can increase employability on graduation by as much as 40%. And the types of roles we have on Ribbit, it's internships, it's part-time, it's freelance, it's project, it's full-time. We get big companies using Ribbit to fill their graduate program pipelines. There's a whole range of different opportunities on there.
Yeah, fantastic. And what was the website once more?
Ribbit, RIBIT.net. The other thing I will mention is that, it's exclusively for students. There's only jobs for students on there, but it's also focused on STEM and digital skills. But that works across IT programming, business finance, creative design, PR marketing, admin support, and R&D. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Annette. So I think a very clear action point for anyone on the call. Yeah, definitely jump onto Ribbit there. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we'll open up the floor to a bit of Q&A. Looks like we've got some questions that have built up here. So let's just have a quick look. Starting at the beginning. Okay. Okay, so what's the best way to engage in supporting / advising training startups in Australia? Was that from you, Abby? Sorry, was that from one of the attendees?
From one of the people on the call.
Okay, no worries. So yes, what was the best way to engage in supporting, advising and training startups in Australia? Who wants to jump in for that one there?
Is this from the point of view of a student who's looking to be a founder of a startup, do you think? Yeah,
it looks like it. Maybe if I could ask for a bit more clarification. If anyone, whoever asked that question, maybe one of you jump onto chat and just build on that a bit more. Okay, move on to the next one while we're getting a bit more info on that. So we've got from Mitch: I would love to work for a startup, but as a third-year uni student, I have no connections in the industry. Very common, trying to break in, nor any idea to how to find startup work. What advice can you give me about finding a startup to work for? For reference, I'm studying a dual bachelor in user experience design, computer science. So, Annette?
Jump on Ribbit. Get your profile up on ribbit.net straight away. Absolutely. It's completely free. You've got nothing to lose. But yeah, look, a big part of finding opportunities throughout your whole career is networking. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of networking. And actually, being quite targeted about it. Think about your career path, have a plan. Who are the people out there that would be valuable in your network to help you reach your career goals? And find them on LinkedIn. Go to events. Obviously, it's a bit harder these days, but go to events, be brave, talk to people, and ask for help. So one of the things that I've discovered, as being part of the Sydney startup scene and also, have done in exchange is people want to help, but they can't read your mind. So be brave and ask for help. Ask people, do you know somebody in this area that might be interested in, get those conversations going and meet people.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks.
I might also add to that answer, some of the VC websites are really good for finding jobs. So if you look at some of the venture capital portfolios, say on Blackbird, Airtree, like the main VC firms, they always have a job board and post lots of jobs on there. So that's a great way to do it. And finding the person who might be in charge of that job and reaching out to them directly is often a way to go about it.
Yeah. I might also draw on my own experience. I actually got my role at the AI startup through LinkedIn. So you can participate in groups on LinkedIn, and then within those groups, sometimes people will drop notes and saying, oh, I'm looking for someone in this area, or then through those groups, you'll be able to actually connect with people in those fields or people who are actually interested in those areas. So maybe you want to try that too, but go on Ribbit first.
Well, do both. LinkedIn is a fantastic way to connect. We've actually got a blog on the Ribbit website that talks about how you can leverage LinkedIn by, starting simply as in following people, following companies commenting, liking, sharing, and then kind of building up to, you know, getting much more engaged and more involved to the point where it's very natural for you to ask somebody to connect you or to ask them a question or so on and so forth. It's a great way to nurture relationships on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think as Annette was saying, I think networking is important. And I would add on to that, I think also showing up is important as well, right?
Yeah.
So showing up to, you know, these type of events that are going on, I was Stone and Chalk, showing up for meetups, showing up on Slack channels, showing up on LinkedIn, and also, by the way, showing up where there are startups and where there are founders, because they're the ones who are also going to be doing some of the hiring. And as Annette mentioned, I think you do want to be targeted. So you really want to look, you know, at yourself in terms of where you've come from, what you're passionate about, and pick that industry or that target area you want to kind of go into. And I will tell you, a lot of times that some of the founders, like, they're out there teaching master classes, they're getting engaged, they're looking for good talent. So you want to be kind of where they are sometimes as well. If there's a master class they're running, or if they're running a meetup group, you may want to join those meetup groups as well, and you know, and show up.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. While I've got you there, and so as a General Assembly graduate, you did the software engineering. It was 12-week course, I believe, or
it was.
Yeah, close to that, intensive course. So after quite a few senior roles in the corporate sector, IBM, I think, was one of the larger businesses that you worked for there. How did this course equip you to pivot to new opportunities within startups? And do you think that kind of technical knowledge was required, do you think?
Yeah, look, the technical knowledge is not required. So I'll start out with that first. But it does give you a leg up. And interestingly, you know, what I started doing first was, before I took the course, I actually just went online and started doing YouTube videos on coding, right? You know, CSS, JavaScript, you know, and just kind of going through it myself and learning it. And then it was interesting. I went on a Friday at General Assembly, and then on the Monday I was actually in a course, right? Like paid course, 12 weeks, full time, full immersion with 24 other people. And it was kind of interesting going through that whole journey, because not only did I get the coding out of it, but there was so much more as well, because the instructor that was teaching actually had a software development shop before. So he knew best practices of coding in terms of what good code looks like. The second thing was, there was 2 other classes going on. There was a UX class and also a data science class. So we got an opportunity to kind of network with others as well, because software development is one side, but to kind of round things up, you got to kind of look at the other disciplines and functions that are going on. So having that networking piece became kind of really important. The other thing that was really valuable that I found that was value add was field trips. So through General Assembly, they took us on field trips to meet other startups and scale ups, right? And what they're all about and what's all going on in their space as well. And the other fascinating thing was, in startup land, we're using a lot of tools like Slack and Trello and Figma and design tools. My first chance of really using some of this stuff was actually on the course itself. So kind of equipped me with, there's a new modern way of collaborating and working as well, which is a good kind of transition into startup land. The outcomes producer at General Assembly was also fantastic. She almost forced everybody to kind of go to the meetup groups, join the Slack channels, and kind of get out there as well. I'll say that out of the 24 people that were on the course, everybody got hired within 2 weeks, right, of graduating. So wow. It was a pretty successful outcome from the course.
That's incredible.
And pivoting into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you, on the flip side, and with your, how do you think your corporate experience also equipped you to work with startups?
Yeah, I think from the corporate side, again, working across different time zones, different cultures, managing different teams and traveling around, and also having to kind of rapidly scale a business in the corporate land, that kind of helped equip for what was happening in the startup land as well. So in the startup land, you're also wearing a lot of different. So one day you could be working on Google Analytics, looking at a report, or on SEO. On another, you could be writing a blog. You could be in strategy mode, building mode, execution mode, and all within the given hour, or within that minute. And you're also coming up with different ideas, right? So I think having the corporate part in terms of working in different functions, that helps. Taking some of the things you've learned from there and applying that to startup land. But you also have to be careful as well. There's some things you've also learned you have to be careful with in terms of structures and processes and politics and all that as well. You also have to be careful in terms of when to introduce those, if you want to introduce those as well in startup land as well, when you're working in a startup. But look, you're just bringing additional viewpoints, additional networks. And from my perspective, also working in Consult Experts as a co-founder, having worked as a consultant, having worked in corporate land, those are some of our clients as well. So there's relevancy as well when you're working in a startup that also gets applied, because your clients working in startup land may in fact be a corporation. So having that point of reference is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned about having to wear multiple hats in a startup, which is very common with a small business, right? people have to play different roles. And I can talk from my own personal experience. I actually really enjoyed it to begin with. One day I might be working on a website, looking at contracts. I'm not sure if I should have been doing that. No, I'm joking. It was all good. But that was really great from a learning perspective. But I think eventually, the novelty starts to wear off to a certain point. I think you learn to outsource to experts and stuff.
You do start outsourcing some of the things, but the core areas you keep discipline there as well. But in the beginnings, especially in the early stages, there's many things, right? Before, while you're trying to monitoring your runway and your cash, you've got to start looking at that as well. But look, everybody as a team kind of comes into it, and and that whole kind of hierarchy is kind of not there. You really are together there of all the people that are there, whether it's interns, whether it's your marketing manager, whether it's a co-founding team. You're really all there, and you're being exposed to a lot of different things in a short period of time.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
And sorry, go on, Anna.
I was just going to say, yeah, I would agree. And I think, certainly moving from a highly structured, hierarchical, heavily processed, heavily politicized corporate and or government environment, coming into a startup environment, it can sometimes feel like it's chaos. It can feel like, who's actually making the decisions here? And knowing that you're comfortable with ambiguity and having an open mind is going to be really important in terms of being able to fit into that type of culture. The plus side is, as Zainda was saying, is you'll get to put your fingers in so many more pies than you would in big corporate land. Now, that's not to say there isn't value in working in corporate land. There is. You will learn a lot, and and then it comes down to common sense and good judgment as to what you then introduce into a startup environment. And certainly some startups could benefit from a little bit more structure and a little less ambiguity. But, the thing to remember with startups as well is that in a lot of cases, those founders have mortgaged their homes to start their businesses. And so they expect some things from you. One of the things they expect is that you have passion for their purpose. And this can make or break your opportunity to get into that startup, is being able to authentically demonstrate passion for their purpose. And then the second is, just really willing to work hard and give anything you're asked to do a go. None of this, my job description puts me in this box, I'm not getting out of that box. You get into every box you're asked to get into. And really, that's the best way that you can learn and grow as well. Because the more you understand about how all the different parts of an organization fit together, the better placed you are to become a founder yourself and start your own business and make good decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting that kind of business exposure segues quite nicely. So question for our fellowship graduate, Daisy. So you've completed the StartMate Women's Fellowship Program and now working for a startup.
Yeah.
How did the program equip you to pivot to working for a startup?
I guess the number one value out of the fellowship program is the network it provides you. You literally have access to pretty much every startup and VC in the Australian ecosystem, and you can get a warm intro to pretty much any of them if you're part of any one of StartMate's programs. They offer more than just the fellowship program now. They offer programs for people who want to become angel investors, accelerator programs, founder programs. So you're all part of this one network, and their aim is to get more people working for Australian startups. So yeah, it really helped in terms of giving me that network, and that's how I was introduced to Baraha, where I currently work. So that was one value. I guess the second thing is that they provide you with a huge number of resources in terms of suggestions for newsletters, books, podcasts, and anything really that's startup related. And it's actually really important to educate yourself on the acumen that's used in the kind of industry and to familiarize yourself with all the companies. So that's what they do well. But you don't have to go through StartMate to do that yourself. You can literally just, starting with the VC firm sites is like the number one thing I would do. And then I guess the third thing out of the StartMate Fellowship, you get to listen to some amazing founders talk and give you their sort of spiel and journey. And the great thing is you hear from all types of backgrounds, and no one person's had the same sort of way to getting to where they are, which is super interesting and inspiring. So I guess it helps provoke thought and also helps educate you as to the types of roles in startups, because they're often quite different to the ones you've come across in the corporate landscape. So an operations role could be very different in a startup, and are also different in different startups as well. So it's all a whole new lingo to learn too.
Yeah, fantastic. And so the $1 million question, do you want to be a founder yourself one day?
I'd love to, but I think, and actually it's funny, someone in the chat had posted this: do you join a startup, or do you start your own one? And I actually think working for one is really important to understand how they kind of operate. If you've got a gun-ho idea that is like the most amazing thing ever, I'd say go for it and start it, because there's no great time to start a startup other than now. Like, you should start it if you've got a great idea. But I think there is something to be said for understanding how they operate, the sort of dysfunction that can go on. And yeah, I think my advice would be to work for one, unless you had an amazing idea.
Yeah. And or another alternative, Daisy, for that would be, if you've got an amazing idea but you've never started your own business, partner with somebody who has.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just Jed, if I can just address a couple of the quick questions in the Q&A, it'll take 2 seconds, but there's a question there regarding international students. I just want to point out, yes, on ribbit.net, there are jobs for international and domestic students. And what you'll find that in startup land, there's a lot more flexibility. Some companies in the corporate sector, and also companies regardless of size, that are working with, like defense, for example, will not be able to hire students unless they are citizens or permanent residents. But there is a plethora of roles where you do not need, for international students, where you do not need to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident. And the other point regarding scams, can't speak to LinkedIn, but what I can tell you on Ribbit is that every company that signs up and job that's posted, and to make sure that it's legit, because there are jobs that get posted in an attempt to try and hive off personal details. So yeah, it is a concern, but yeah, we eyeball every single company and job posted.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, thanks, Annette. Okay, and a question for Ashley, as our university graduate, has completed some internships. Now that you've been working for a period in your chosen field, what else did you want to learn about next?
So I don't think there is ever an end to learning, but speaking for myself, right now I'm actually taking a course on UX and UI. So that's to deepen my experience around the interaction design parts, and which really kickstarted around 3rd year for me. And it's great because now I have those experiences and my current role to really lean on. And frankly speaking, I'm also learning how to record and produce my own podcast series. So the list just goes on and on for me.
Excellent. Own podcast. Give Joe Rogan a run for his money.
It's something that I'm still incubating, but yes.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent. Okay, and question well, for the whole panel, really, talking about internships and mentoring in particular, who has either been a mentor or been mentored before? And everyone, that's good.
Yeah, so my first experience was actually as a mentor for Mega New South Wales in 2001, which was a program funded by the New South Wales state government, potential founders through a whole process of learning with other founders and people in industry. And currently I mentor a young woman who's an experiential futurist, who's incredibly creative, and where I help her is on the commercial modeling side of the business that she's trying to build. In terms of being mentored myself, many years ago, I saw a video of an amazing woman called Heather, who is actually a digital media guru. She trained all of the superstars in the advertising sector. And I just saw her on this video and thought, oh my God, I need to meet this lady. And so I reached out to the person who posted the video, who happened to know, and said, can you introduce me? And I just asked the question, Heather, will you mentor me? She said, maybe let's have a coffee first and see how we get on. And of course, we got on like a house on fire. And that was just a fantastic experience for me. I just joined a board, digital media board, AMIA, and desperately needed a female to discuss things with. So it was brilliant. Encourage everyone to go and find a mentor. And when you can give back, mentor as well.
Yeah, definitely. And
Yeah, I've been mentoring a founder for the past 8 months on I've been mentoring a founder for the past 8 months on a social purpose platform to kind of do good for humans. She's looking for external, somebody externally to kind of help her through her journey. It's good to have an outside in kind of viewpoint just to help her through some of her decision making and also kind of extending her network as well. She's built a fantastic community, but it's like now taking the community to the next level and building her platform. I've also been mentored as well. I was actually mentored by somebody who actually was a founder of a property tech and then had a large exit. And again, it's good because as he went through his pivots, it's good to have that sounding board as we're kind of working through pivots as well. I also mentored another founder who actually was a founder of a startup with a team, and his team collapsed. So he just needed help to kind of pick up some of those pieces, right, along in that whole process. So it's always good to kind of have that extra level of help. But look, the way I see mentorship, and I've had mentorship throughout my career where I've mentored or being mentored, there's like informal mentoring, there's also formal mentoring. Right. So informal is you may just want to catch up once in a while. Maybe it's for a specific task. And there could be formal networking where you actually have structured reviews, objectives you want to kind of get to. I just think it's important to, one, make sure you kind of click with your mentor, but also know in some cases if it's just a formal network when that mentorship is over. Some advice there.
Yeah, actually, if I can just add to that, I also would encourage to actually have an agreement in place. Doesn't have to be complex. Just a very simple agreement that, if anything else, just covers the rules of engagement, because mentors are very busy people. So you have to respect their time. And so just simple things like, coffee once a month, email as much as you like, don't call me during business hours, don't SMS me at home, things like that, just to understand the rules of engagement.
Yeah, I guess often mentors, like you say, very busy, often quite seasoned people, and often it tends to be for free that they're doing it as well. I don't, if it's kind of paid, it's maybe more advisory type work. So I think it's a good point to understand where the boundaries are and respect.
Yeah. I think as well, just on that, if I might say something, you don't always, Inda was saying, you don't always have to have a formal mentor arrangement. Obviously, it's very helpful if you go through a program and have a formal mentor arrangement, which is what happens at StartMate through the fellowship, for instance. But I know that I've come across people in my life who when I reflect on it, I always seek out their advice and I really respect them, and they're in completely different industries to me. Funnily enough, I met one of my mentors, like unofficial mentors, on a meditation retreat, had no idea what he did because we didn't have phones or anything. And then when I came back to Sydney to civilization, I kind of looked him up and thought, wow, this guy is really impressive, and we got along really well and kept in touch. So I think really thinking about who's in your current network and who you could really lean on to ask for sound advice on things. It's great to get objective perspectives when you're making decisions.
Yeah. There's also something called reverse mentoring, right? So reverse mentoring is where, I'll give you an example, right? It could be, for example, where the dean of a university and a student is actually the reverse mentor. So in this case, the dean, perhaps, for example, actually wants to know more about what's actually happening with students and student lives, and student engagement with the university. That would actually be a reverse mentoring program as well. It could also be a CEO of a company that wants to then learn more about what's actually happening on the street with specific customers. So maybe he may have a reverse mentor as somebody that's working in the contact center, for example, that's talking to customers all the time to get that feedback. So those are opportunities to continue to show up, to reach out and make those connections. And perhaps you could reach out to somebody as well and offer up a reverse mentorship.
Yeah, I like it. And yourself, Ashley, have you had a mentor before?
Yeah, so I think I had a few mentors as well, both formal and informal. But I think the most important thing to remember is, because it's not a transactional relationship, it's often very genuine and very generous in terms of the value that their advice can give you. Yeah, I really recommend getting a mentor.
Absolutely. And on the subject of learning, everyone, what avenues do you all tap into, formal and informal, to do so? We talked about podcasts. What are some other examples? I can see Annette nodding there, so I'm going to throw this one to you, Annette.
Yeah, look, I always make the joke that I learn through osmosis, so obviously reading, but I prefer to learn by talking to people. So great conversations with people who are much smarter than me, and there's lots of them out there. And yeah, so it's a combination. And volunteering, I've been on New South Wales government steering committees, the AMIA board, and then the national chapter before that, a whole bunch of different things. Get volunteering and mixing with people in different industries and different sectors is a great way to learn. And, you know, nearly every industry these days is about delivering a service. And so understanding more you can understand about other industries, the better you are able to bring that knowledge and that intel into that startup and have that, you know, strengthen that service mind. So yes, for me, I'm just a big one on talk to people, learn from people.
Yep. Yeah, excellent. Anyone else in terms of any particular sources, you know, I don't know, maybe books or anything like that, or specific companies that you follow?
I personally think that using LinkedIn is really important. So following companies that you really like so that you receive the updates is important. I think subscribing to various newsletters. So again, I'll just draw on the VC firms, like they send out a monthly newsletter at the end of each month. A lot of companies do that. So any company you're interested in, I'd advise doing that. And also the AFR is a great source of Australian startup news. So would do that. And then my personal favorite for newsletters is one called The Hustle, which is just worldwide kind of news.
Awesome. The Hustle. Yeah, I think the VCs in particular, like you say, Daisy, just to keep up to date with what's going on. In particular, I think Abby has shared some links in the chat as well to some of the VCs that people might want to follow. So Blackbird, Airtree, and some of the others.
And I've just put a couple of links to books in there as well that I use quite regularly. I was very fortunate in that I got to attend a workshop run by Yves Pignor, how you pronounce it, from Strategizer. You know, the value proposition canvas is a one I use. And Juliet's book, Which Two Heads Are Better Than One, from a team diversity and innovation perspective, I just love that book.
Absolutely, and I'll probably add in a book recommendation there as well. 0 to 1. If anyone's read 0 to 1, it's probably the most obvious one. If you Googled startup books, that's probably the first one that would come up. But very good. Obviously, Peter Thiel, and yeah, just talking around, you know, how to innovate, and yeah, just really changes your perspective on coming up with ideas for any kind of aspiring founders on the call or just, you know, wanting to kind of get into that space.
Yeah, just to add on to that, there's also a great podcast by Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn, Masters of Scale, which I
love this one.
Yeah, which is great, especially Handcrafted, which is the Airbnb story. I still kind of listen to that. There's also another good site called Product Hunt. So there's a lot of startups as well will also go on to Product Hunt to kind of start getting upvotes and stuff. But if you start getting feedback, that's a good way to start engaging and trying things out with a startup, right? It now shows that you care about the community and you care about giving feedback. And so it's a good way to get the attention of a startup and actually the founder as well. And then there's also some formal, you know, courses that are out there as well that you can also take. I recently did one which was just on voice training and storytelling, which is by a magician who also does a lot of speaking engagements around the world. His name is Vin Jiang, and I'll put that in the chat. But I did that course. It was a 1-week course of voice training mornings, every morning, and it was during lockdown. So I kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah, awesome. And I think just on in the chat now, we've got some book recommendations popping up as well, which is great. We've got The Hustle and Trends, I think, from Zach. Thank you, Zach. And then we've got 138 Dates by Rebecca Campbell, who's doing a talk tomorrow. We've got a link there as well, if anyone wants to jump onto that.
I know Rebecca, her story is amazing. You know, from, I think Posse might have been her first startup, which was, you know, around getting fans to sell the tickets to their favorite bands and built around that. I remember her presenting at Tech 23 a million years ago. So yeah, that Rebecca she's a gorgeous lady and a fountain of knowledge in terms of startup experience, and especially around capital raising. She's got a lot to say about capital raising.
And she's raised over 17 million. But what's going to be fascinating about this talk tomorrow is she's also sharing that she applied the same business acumen and strategizing to finding a life partner. So she went on 138 dates. So if anyone's interested, it'll be a fascinating talk. It's tomorrow. So come and join us.
She must have the patience of a saint to do that.
I agree.
Interesting. Yeah, and so we'll go into some Q&A, guys. We'll just work our way through, see if there's any questions we've missed out here. It looks like we've got one for yourself, Daisy, actually. What is the best way, I think it's from David, what is the best way or person to offer to be a mentor in StartMate?
So I think I linked the website for the StartMate mentoring thing. I I don't think it's a locked page as far as I can tell, but if it is, just ping me on LinkedIn and I can send you some forms or whatever.
Perfect. Okay, cool. All right. Do we have any other questions here? Any questions, people, that you want to add into the chat now?
Let's just ask for some tips about, what they should put on their CV regarding without any work experience. Obviously, it's a university student that's on the call.
I will take that one for sure. I'm struggling to find it, but I'll just ask it off the bat. So in terms of, what to add to your resume without experience. So I guess depending on where you're coming from, if you've got education, then I think you can definitely build on what you've studied. If you've had any particular projects as part of your studies, which a lot of people do. If you've done like a software engineering degree or something like that, I expect you would have got involved in some projects with peers and study mates, and definitely add that in and kind of flesh that out as if it were your employment experience. Really talk about them projects and build out the details, and that people really be keen to see that versus just saying, I've got a degree and that's it. Equally, if on the subject of learning, if you are studying for any courses, whether it's LinkedIn Learning, certifications or anything like that, definitely get them on the CV there. If you're, again, I'm putting my technology recruiter on, but if you are a techie and you're looking and you're online on GitHub or anything like that, and you're working on any projects, again, add them. If you're active online, any publications or any forums that you contribute to, get it in your resume. And I think also, depending on, different people have different opinions about cover letters, but I think if on the subject of startups, if you're applying for a role with a startup, I would really try and appeal to the founder or whoever it is that's reading your resume, and include some kind of nice cover letter that really talks about, their product or their vision, whatever it is they're building, and why you're really passionate and interested, to join them specifically. So I think personally, that's something that would really resonate with someone looking at your resume in startup world anyway. So that's probably what I would say to that. Anyone wants to jump in, Annette?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and the other thing too is just think about your soft skills, because it doesn't have to be experience in the workforce. It can be just experience in life that demonstrates your soft skills. Negotiating, being able to be a team, be a good communicator, a whole bunch of things. And whether you're babysitting 5 rugrats and managing chaos in the living room, whatever it is, there'll be examples you can draw from life that demonstrate some soft skills. So think about that a bit creatively as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Actually reminds me of an example I had some time back. I was interviewing, or really just chatting to a cybersecurity graduate, and they had experience. I think they'd been a manager at McDonald's, and we were talking about their experiences actually on this exact subject. And it was actually my mistake. I kind of brushed past that and said, it's probably not too relevant, so you don't need to get that in the resume. And he actually kind of put me in a place and said, actually, what I was doing, I was troubleshooting, faulty machinery. I talked about all this other stuff. I had to comply with industry standards, because obviously it's food and everything like that. So actually, I think you're completely right in it. You can look at transferable experience, and I think you can really kind of build that across. I think it's a good point there.
There's actually another question for Annette, which is about should I pay to join a guaranteed internship program?
Interesting one. I think, look, I would say it depends how much. Who's it with? What are they guaranteeing? They're guaranteeing a job at the end of it. How good is the experience, and how does it fit with your career path? I would first try and get an internship through ribbit.net and or through any of the VC job boards, etc. I'd probably go down that road first. There are a lot of programs out there for grads as well, where you pay thousands to get a placement. But I would be looking at them very carefully, wanting to be very sure that I was getting good return on my investment.
Excellent. Thanks, Annette. So it looks like that's pretty much it for questions. So kind of rounds things off, everyone. So thanks everyone for your engagement and time, and everyone attending, of course. I think all I would add just at the tail end is firstly just to highlight the huge opportunity that there is for new talent trying to break into the industry at the moment. Speaking as a recruiter, there is a real talent shortage. It's not a fable. It is a problem. A lot of companies are facing it. And really what that means is there's a lot of businesses that are now looking to invest more so in entry level and new talent. Big push for, grad programs, internships. Salaries are becoming absolutely unmanageable for a lot of businesses. We're getting people, as in conversations with us, software engineers that are asking for 30% higher salaries than they were last year. And it's just a symptom of a candidate short market. So anyway, ultimately that means there's a big push to hire new people into the industry. So because the point is to really, do your research, look for some businesses that you're really keen on, and don't dismiss anything. Absolutely approach them and get out there. And on the subject, make sure that you're, as we said earlier, networking, build your online brand, your LinkedIn profile, tailor it to your industry or the industry you're trying to break into. Connect with, I hate to say it, influencers, I hate that word, people that are well known in the industry. If they're posting, content that's getting attention, you can actually comment on that, leave constructive opinions and stuff like that. And really, that's just elevating your own visibility. And consider that kind of your proactive job application. You'll start to find people that might actually start approaching you for jobs versus the other way around. So that's probably all I would say to round that. I think it's pretty much it. Yeah. So thanks again, everyone. We're now going to embark on one of these learning avenues and enjoy some virtual networking drinks for 15 minutes.
We're in the 15 minutes. Yeah, you've got.
Oh, we are. Okay.
But the team, this is just a soft wind down. We had some feedback from people where we cut off the call and it was a bit jarring. So we just stay on the call until 1:15. So if anyone wants to hang around, we'll still be on the call. We can answer questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and then we'll turn the call off at 6:15. So just a soft wind down. By all means, go and pour yourself a glass of wine or make yourself a cup of tea or whatever you need to do, but we'll be here for the next 7 minutes.
It's not Friday yet, so I'll stick to my water.
Yeah, it'll take me too long to make my martini. What I was going to say, though, just to add to our discussion a bit, when we talk about innovation and we talk about startups and people talk about failure, which I'm not very fond of that word, I like to think of it in terms of lowering the cost of experimentation. And if you think of your career path from woe to go as one big fabulous or a series of little experiments, there is absolutely nothing wrong with jumping into something that looks good and then jumping out if it's rubbish. No one's going to judge you for that, but you will learn not just about what you do, but also about what you don't like. And that is just as valuable. And so I would encourage everybody just to give it a go, be brave. Try everything until you find your passion, your path, and as I said earlier, ask for help.
There's another
I really echo that. Sorry, I just remembered something, and I really should have brought it up at the beginning. But at the end of my degree, I actually got an offer to work at a corporate, and I actually started my role there. But I think around 2 months in, I decided to quit because I was thinking, I guess I enjoy being able to have autonomy over things and really carrying it from start to end a lot more than just doing a tiny part and being just the tiniest cog in the process. And so I waved it goodbye and I'm happy now.
That's a great reason to move on from a corporate, and the right employer will really appreciate the reasoning, the logic behind your decision. It will actually stand you in good stead. That's fantastic.
Just a question that's come through. What's the difference between an internship and graduate position? Who wants to pick that one up? Okay,
so in the context of Ribbit, an internship is usually for an undergrad. So it's a position, it's part-time, it's relevant to what you're studying. And whereas the graduate programs, you've finished your degree and you're moving into a grad program, and they are typically run by very large organizations, but I think there are also a few grad programs in the startup world and in the accelerator space and what have you, in the VC space. A grad program is usually very structured, and it's a way for an organization to really embed you in the business, determine whether you're a good cultural fit, and basically prepare you for that full-time. So the great thing about internships while you're studying is you can do lots of different ones because they're generally, relatively short periods, part-time, so you can experiment. Whereas if you accept a role in a grad program, that's usually maybe a 12-month program, and you really do need to commit to it. One of the big challenges, especially at the big end of town, as Inda was mentioned earlier, is showing up. They'll accept students into the grad programs, and quite a few won't turn up on the day. That's very frustrating for businesses. And so I would, make a good decision, show up, and if you don't like it, leave.
I'm assuming a grad program in Australia would mostly be a paid grad program, whereas an internship may not be, would usually be non-paid.
No, internships. So in terms of the Fair Work Act, if you're doing a job and you're not being paid, then it's actually a learning experience. So the definition is very much that if somebody else in that organization who is getting paid would be doing that work that you're doing, then they need to pay you. And that's the kind of an easy way of explaining it. On Ribbit, it's all paid internships unless it's for course credit. And if it's for course credit, then it's actually embedded in your degree and the university needs to approve it. And there's supervising, there's reporting, there's a whole bunch of criteria around that. But yeah, free internships, you know, you're worth more than that. Everyone's worth something.
Yeah.
And just on that, even volunteering, you know, there's often a requirement for per diem payments and things like that based on people having to either park their car in the city or petrol to get out to a location if it's regional based or whatever it might be. So yeah, I 100% agree with you, Annette. I think well, people are worth that, you know, they should be recognised.
Yeah, we encourage, if a company posts a job for course credit on Ribbit, we encourage them to include some sort of stipend. Because, you know, as we say, at the end of the day, you know, students might still have rent to pay. They need to eat. They need to get to the location of work. There's costs, you know, so be generous. Yeah, you get more out of people if you give them things that they need.
All right, Jed, we might wind up now because we've answered most of the questions. I'll download the chat and follow up if there's anything that hasn't been answered. I just want to say a big thank you to the panelists and to Jed for really fascinating. You certainly have taken us through the journey of internships, the fact that most of you are actually graduates from university, but also the true grit and creativity that's required to keep learning and contributing particularly to startup opportunities. You know, these are the people on this call that we want in startup land. This is, you know, take the advice on board, be creative and be decisive. I love the fact that Ashley had the wherefore and the brave ability, you know, to actually say no to a corporate role. And it was in a really recognised, you know, great corporate environment and just thought it's not the right fit. So trust yourself with that and you'll have a really flourishing, enriching career. So thanks for joining us for another Pivot event. We're so grateful. And now you can go and enjoy your family or your friends. For all of those who are in lockdown, take care of yourselves and we'll see you at our next Pivot event.